Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to lean over a little bit. I just want to make sure I don't get too far away from the mic. So somebody wave at me if you can't hear me. So my name is Allison Singolani. I'm the policy manager at Silicon Valley at Home. So we are a nonprofit organization. Do I want to?
Yeah. Oh, so ella es Allison Singolani. Singolani, y policy manager, y es manejadora de política de Silicon Valley at Home.
All right. So we're a nonprofit organization. We advocate for bold systemic change to meet the housing needs of the residents of Santa Clara County at all income levels. We engage early and consistently on important policy topics, leveraging our deep policy expertise and technical knowledge to win broad-based community support with evidence-based strategies.
Can we just do a self-introduction?
Sure. Oh,
and
yeah.
then talk about that before
Of course.
Yeah. I think that was. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sharon Goey with the City of Gilroy, Community Development Director. And we also have Sandra Nava here representing Housing and Community Services Division, and Cindy McCormick, who's our Customer Service Manager, also representing the Planning Division. And I think later on you'll introduce your colleague, Matthew Reed. So welcome, and then if you want to translate that, and then I'll interpret that. We'll talk about the app.
Well, I think you can hear me.
Yeah.
Sharon
Okay.
Goy es la directora de Desarrollo Comunitario y Cindy McCormick es la manejadora de Servicio al Cliente. Yo soy Sandra Nava, trabajo en la División de Vivienda y Servicios Comunitarios y somos los representantes de la ciudad de Gilroy y ellos son los representantes de SB at Home que van a dar la presentación esta noche.
If you would like to see the Spanish translation as we do the presentation, you can look at it on the screen here. But also, if you want to read it on your phone, whether in Spanish or in different language, come up here and scan the QR code. It will pull up the application, and then you can select the language.
So, la presentación va a ser en inglés, entonces si ustedes quieren ver la presentación en español, se va a ver la traducción ahí arriba en la pantalla. También tienen una opción de escanear este barcode aquí y lo puede ver en su teléfono si quiere esa opción, nomás venga y escanee este barcode aquí.
And another quick thing, some of you heard that already. We have 2 signing sheets there. They're the same thing. If you want to stay interested about city's future housing workshops, feel free to put down your information there. And we also have some drinks and refreshments, so please feel free to help yourself.
También tenemos una hoja para que apunte su nombre y información. Quieren más información de juntas que vengan en el futuro acerca de la tienda. Luego también hay refrescos y un poquito de comida. Si gustan, por favor, vengan.
All right, thank you so much. Now that we have everyone connected, so Silicon Valley at Home also works around advocacy to produce more affordable housing to meet the needs of our residents, to preserve the existing affordable housing that we already have, and to protect tenants from being displaced from the area. We also work on education for the public and for leadership development around affordable housing. So, what's that?
Apple's working.
Yes.
Is it working?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Sí saben que hay 2 opciones para español de México o español de España. ¿Y todos ya están viendo lo que necesitan ver? Ok.
All right, so the reason that we're here tonight, the reason that we created this Foundations of Affordable Housing workshop is that we've heard a lot from our members, and our members are community members like you. They're elected officials. They're folks who build affordable housing. We're hearing that people are confused by what we mean when we say affordable housing. They're not sure what that is. They're not sure that building more housing can help fix the problems that we have with the high cost of housing or the shortage of housing. They're not sure that our elected officials, that our governments are going to be able to fix the problems that we have with homelessness and lack of affordable housing. But despite the frustration, there's a real willingness to get involved, and I think we see that tonight with all of you who are here. Even though it was raining and kind of a sloppy night to be out on the roads and coming out, we really appreciate you being here. There is a willingness to try to understand the problem and figure out how to fix it together.
Allison, I just want to say one thing, because they don't understand affordable housing, the words that you're using in Spanish.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell them.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Cuando ella habla de affordable housing, está hablando de lo que dice en su teléfono, vivienda asequible, pero muchas personas me han dicho que no saben lo que quiere decir vivienda asequible. So, affordable housing, vivienda asequible, son las viviendas que las ofrecen más baratas, un precio más razonable, un precio más económico. So, cuando usted ve vivienda asequible, de eso están hablando, que son más económicos esos apartamentos o esas viviendas.
Thank you, Sandra.
It's not a common term.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. So what we'll talk about tonight is a little bit about the housing shortage and who is hurt most by it, how we got into a housing shortage, how affordable housing helps solve the housing crisis, how affordable housing works, and how it benefits all of us. So we'll just dive right in here. So who can afford to rent? The market, the way that that housing is paid for, is not building homes that all of us can afford, and that's where affordable housing for people with lower incomes becomes so important. Here we're looking at who can afford the average rent in Santa Clara County based on the average wage for key jobs. We can see that someone who is earning minimum wage would need to work almost 3 full-time jobs to afford the average rent in the county. That's working 24 hours every day. So the result of that is that people are being pushed out by the high cost of housing. So we have worker shortages. We have workers that are commuting from areas that are far away from their jobs. We have people that are paying too much money for their housing and having to drive much further, which is also bad for the environment. In some cases, we have families where many families are living together in one home to try to be able to afford a safe place to live. Because of policies that we have seen created in almost all of our cities that limit the amount of housing that can be built, we haven't built enough housing for the jobs that we have. Since 2010, we've added on average 1 new home for every 7 new jobs. The supply and demand imbalance, we have more people that need houses than we have houses, has meant that the houses we do have gotten more and more expensive. We don't have enough housing for the jobs that we have, so there's competition for the housing that's left. So what are we talking about when we talk about low-income housing or extremely low-income housing? Income level categories are determined by the federal government and by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and they're adjusted to account for how expensive it is to live in different parts of the state. Santa Clara County, our county, has one of the highest area median incomes in the entire state or country at $181,300 for a family of 4 in 2023. That has increased $30,000 just in 2 years. So who is harmed by that? We can see, so the red bars that you see here, the dark red are folks who are paying more than half of their income for housing every month. The lighter red is folks who are paying more than 30%, so between 30 and 50% of their income. You can see the bar here on the left, the tallest bar, are the folks who are earning the least money. It makes sense, are having to pay the most part of their incomes when they're just to keep a safe roof over their heads. When they do that, there's not much money left over for other things you need. Not much money left for shoes for children, for health care, for food, for other things that are necessary. Even though the folks with lowest incomes are hurting the worst, you can see that folks with very low incomes or low incomes or even moderate incomes are also having a hard time affording the housing that they need. Affordable housing is really critical to meeting the needs of our severely cost-burdened households. Those are the families that are paying more than half their incomes. They're more likely than other renters to sacrifice things that they really need, like healthy food and health care, to pay rent, or to experience unstable housing or become homeless because they might be evicted. So who are the people in extremely low-income households? In California, about 40% of them are working already. Another 30% are senior adults, and 13% have physical or developmental disabilities. So that's about 83% of our extremely low-income renter households who are people who are working in fixed incomes or in low-wage jobs. In Santa Clara County, we have more than 50,000 families who are extremely low incomes who rent and don't have access to an affordable home because we don't have enough of them. These are our working community members, and they can't afford to live here. The lack of affordable housing hurts people in a lot of different ways. We've talked about some of the impossible choices that people who have very low incomes have to make between health care, clothing, shoes, transportation to work, or rent. We've talked a little bit about overcrowding, where many families may have to share a home together to afford the rent. Housing instability, where people may have to move often. Health, educational, and employment impacts. If you're having to live very far from your job, it makes it really hard to get there. If your car breaks down or you can't get a ride, not being able to afford a home close to where you work can be a real hardship. People can be displaced from their communities, where you may have to move far away from the community where you grew up or where your family and friends are, where your work is, or may be evicted. In Gilroy, 22% of renter households pay more than half of their income for rent. So we can see homelessness. The graph that's here on the right shows that as rent gets higher, homelessness, our rate of homelessness also gets higher. So we've heard a lot of other common explanations that people who are homeless may be people who maybe they became homeless because of drug use or mental illness or poverty. But what we can see is that in many parts of the country where there are also these problems, there is not the same high rate of homelessness that we experience here. Homelessness is directly connected to the higher rents that we have and the lack of affordable housing. Lack of affordability also hurts our environmental resilience. Because of our sprawling land use patterns that are created and made worse by the lack of affordable housing close to jobs, people have longer commutes. More driving means more greenhouse gases that are emitted. It means that people are too far apart to use public transit, so it's hard to have bus lines where we need them to help get people to work. It also means that we have huge maintenance costs to take care of all of those roads that are carrying people over those long distances. So having communities where people are closer together, where homes are closer to jobs, more compact communities where you can walk to what you need or bike to what you need, also make it easier to build more affordable housing. So how did we get into this mess? Part of this was government part of the reason for our housing shortage is rooted in government policies that were originally designed to keep Black, Latino, and Asian residents out. Beginning in the 1930s, the federal government used color-coded maps, known as redlining maps, to rank the loan-worthiness of neighborhoods in more than 200 cities across the United States, in large part on the basis of the race of the people who lived there. Neighborhoods with residents of color were considered too risky for loans and were marked in red and excluded from homeownership and lending programs. As a result, residents of color could not get home loans, even as the suburban landscape rapidly expanded, and they were funneled into neighborhoods that then declined from disinvestment. Policies like redlining, racial steering, and racial covenants, which prevented homeowners from selling their homes to purchasers of color, were finally outlawed in California, but not until 1960. They still persist today in practice, with lenders often charging higher interest rates or refusing home loans to Black and Latino buyers, or appraising their homes at values that are far below the comparable homes owned by white homeowners. Together, these government policies and practices permitted by the government help drive a huge wealth gap that makes it harder for Black and Latino families to purchase homes in single-family zone neighborhoods. Even though they have more barriers to homeownership, ongoing illegal discrimination also makes it harder for many people of color to rent. Property managers are less likely to respond to prospective Black and Hispanic tenants when they ask about open apartment listings. Illegal discrimination against renters with housing vouchers is common, and racial wealth gap means that it's not a coincidence that 65% of voucher holders are people of color. So what is single-family zoning? Single-family zoning makes it hard for a community to build anything other than a single home on a single lot, which is the most expensive kind of housing. So it makes it harder to build things like apartments or homes for rent that are easier for people with lower incomes to be able to access and afford. Single-family zoning really spread out in the Bay Area right at the same time as our growth was taking off, driven by a lot of the new industries that were coming into the Bay Area, a lot of defense and technology companies. So that means that as we're spreading out and as we're growing in these patterns that make it really hard for people to be able to afford housing. Single-family zoning we still have today, and it's a government policy that's helped create a shortage of housing inside single-family zones where limited land is extra expensive, and outside single-family zones where all the rest of us are stuffed in, and that's made the prices skyrocket both inside and outside. Just to be clear, there is no problem with single-family houses. The problem is just with the zoning that makes it hard to build anything else. In the past, we've also had small groups of existing residents that have had a disproportionate amount of power over what could be built and where, if anything. So that means that the policies that were made to keep people out in the past have worked as they were intended to, and many current Bay Area residents are being displaced from their homes by rising costs, no matter how hard they work. The housing shortage and affordability crisis affects all of us. And together with our local, state, and federal governments, we have a collective obligation to do better together. The roots of the housing crisis are planted firmly in racial discrimination and segregation, and reinforce discrimination and segregation. These same policies and ideas have played a key role in our housing shortage. The negative consequences of the housing shortage hurt all of us, not just the people who are struggling to find affordable housing. So how does affordable housing help? Housing costs don't just affect where any single person or family is able to live, they impact the economy and the resiliency of our whole region. For the thousands of small businesses that are struggling to stay afloat, to attract customers and skilled employees, making housing more affordable is critical. Safe, stable homes are the foundation of strong communities. Good schools, good jobs, and safe neighborhoods that we all want, those all depend on homes. Affordable housing is an asset that sustains and strengthens our communities by ensuring we all have a safe, stable home. Affordable housing is also the public's answer to addressing the needs of people who are harmed by our housing market. It's a bridge between our current inequitable system and a place where everyone in our community can thrive. Affordable housing provides a range of different housing solutions that each address the diverse needs of local residents who can't afford the cost of housing in Silicon Valley. So we talked about different solutions for different needs. So affordable housing is not just one thing because people's needs are not all the same. All of these types of affordable housing are deed restricted. That means they can't change to the higher market rents for at least 55 years. So even if a lower income renter moves out of affordable housing, the home will continue to serve the community, providing affordable housing to families for decades to come. So some of the different kinds of housing we have are permanent supportive housing, which is a proven solution to homelessness for the most vulnerable homeless people. It combines affordable housing assistance with critical support services to meet the needs of residents that are designed to help build independent living skills with community-based health care, treatment, and employment services. We can see here some types of that might be permanent supportive housing for adults with developmental disabilities or for people experiencing homelessness. We might also have affordable housing for groups of people with unique needs that helps build community and allow developers to more effectively meet needs. So affordable housing for seniors, for veterans. We have on the right side of the screen there, you can see an affordable housing development that has combined seniors and transition-aged youth, which are foster kids that have aged out of the system that need a little bit of extra time to develop some stability. So that combination of youth and seniors is actually working out really well for everyone, and everyone is really enjoying, that lives in that development is really enjoying the combination. We also have mixed income housing, where you have people that have a range from very low incomes, moderate rate incomes, living together in the same community, so that the people who are able to afford to pay higher rents are helping to cover some of the costs of the folks who can't afford to pay as much. We also have inclusionary housing. So that's a policy that requires some of the homes in a new housing development to be affordable to lower or moderate income households. Inclusionary housing tends to be successful in creating affordable housing units in locations with strong residential real estate markets like ours. So we also have some examples from around Santa Clara County of some affordable housing developments, because we tend to have ideas about what they may look like or who may live there that sometimes aren't necessarily accurate. So these are the Sobrato Gilroy apartments with 26 different apartments serving people who were formerly homeless. In Morgan Hill, we have 39 units of affordable housing, half permanent supportive housing. This is a development in San Jose with 70 units. About half of them are for formerly unhoused families. On the first floor, there's commercial space there that has a credit union that serves the local community, and a few different nonprofit organizations that work with the local community. This is a senior housing, affordable housing development in San Jose. So it has an elevator, an ADA accessible bathroom so that people who are using a wheelchair can get around easily inside the apartments. So how does affordable housing work? At this point, I'm going to introduce Matthew Reed. He is the Director of Policy for SB at Home.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This one moves with the... Gotcha. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how affordable housing actually happens. Part of our goal is to demystify, make it easier to understand how this comes to be. Because how do you do this? How do we make it actually affordable to people? How does it work? So we've come up with a little story. This is our family here on the right. They're working very hard. They can afford to pay $1,800 a month in rent. The problem is that the cost of building and operating the apartment building is equivalent to $3,600 a month in rent. So this family can only pay half of what it costs to build and operate a new apartment building. So they're in trouble. They can't afford to pay $3,600. They can only afford to pay $1,800. So the challenge when we are building the affordable housing is to figure out how to close the gap, because we're missing half of the cost that we have to build and maintain and manage the property. Whoops. So we do that by bringing in different sources of money that help us bring down the costs of operating that building, of building it and operating it every month. So we use public funding that helps with the construction and the development costs. That allows us to borrow less money from the bank, and that means that we have a lower monthly cost, and we can cover it with the rents that our families can afford to pay. So, remember, the cost for this building was going to be $3,600 a month. And all that we could afford to pay was $1,800 a month. So what we're doing is we're bringing the cost to operate that building right to the place where the family can afford to live there. And we do that by providing federal, state, and local assistance and subsidies to building the property. So there's a common misperception that affordable housing means the government gives the property owner every month money for the tenants. That's not actually how we do it. We put the money in the beginning when we're building the apartments so that it costs less to operate them and so that we can make them affordable to lower-income households. So the subsidy is only in the beginning, and then these properties sustain themselves over time. Sometimes, we borrow some additional money to make some improvements, but really we do this with the upfront subsidy that goes into how we build these developments. And we'll have time for more questions on this. It's just a common misperception, and really what it takes is the subsidy in the beginning, and then the affordable housing sustains itself. The challenge is the subsidy, there's a lot of different sources, and we need to bring them together in order to close that gap. So the big ones that we use are the federal low-income housing tax credits, which are up in the upper left-hand corner. And there's actually a lot of a regular bank loan. But we also have to put together sometimes money from the state, sometimes money from the county. We've just gone through a period where the voters approved what we call Measure A at the county level. And we're just finishing up spending that money. Sometimes there's federal grant, sometimes the cities own land, and the city invests that public land into providing that as a subsidy for building affordable housing. The blue one, local government loan, is important. That's what the city of Gilroy has to put in to make this work. So even though it's a small piece of a puzzle, if we take it away, sorry, I'm managing two slide decks here. If we take it away, our puzzle starts to fall apart. So each of these pieces is necessary, but that local piece, or even a local piece that's part of a county-wide program, is really essential. Because without that local piece, I'm not going to be able to get all of those other sources of money. If I don't have the local investment, it's harder for me to get all of the federal investment. It's harder for me to get all of the state investment. So if we don't put the local pieces in, sometimes it's like walking away from $4 for every dollar that we put into the process. But this is how we close the gap, right? Is by investing in the front end and using that public investment to bring down the costs of building affordable housing. So we hear this a lot. Affordable housing costs a lot to build. The truth is that all housing, especially in Santa Clara County, is very expensive to build. So we just get that out of the way. That land costs are high, labor costs are super high, materials are very high. As you may know, right now borrowing money is extremely expensive because inflation and the interest rates are high. So it's very expensive to build all types of housing. Affordable housing is, depending on what kind, it's between 7 and 10% more expensive. Part of the reason is that we have to put together all of these different funding sources. I've skipped one. Putting together the complex financing costs time and costs money. We also integrate spaces into our affordable projects that don't get integrated into a regular market rate project. For example, sometimes there's a community room. Sometimes there's space for daycare. Some of the developments that Allison was talking about are specifically built to support folks, families, and individuals with complex needs. So they need space to provide services. So these additional service spaces drive the cost up. Affordable developments, because they use public dollars, because there's public financing in affordable development, they pay what we call prevailing wage. So this is equivalent to roughly what the union wage would be in your community. And that is a requirement by law, and it's part of our effort to invest in our people, in our workforce, by paying wages that are living wages to the folks that do the work. But that increases the labor costs somewhere between 20 and 30%. So there are additional costs that come in. The total is 7 to 10% different. The great thing is that we build affordable housing better than we build market rate housing. The standards are higher. These buildings are built, they have to last 55 years at least. They're built to different standards. We are very conscious of investing in what is a public asset that has to sustain itself over time. So these are great places. They are built for people, and they are resources that will serve the needs of our communities, hopefully for generations. So, what are the benefits? So, we all benefit from affordable housing. We know that high housing prices have a huge impact on our local economy. We know that there are jobs that are left unfilled because people can't afford to live here at the wages that people are paying. And we know that when affordable housing is readily available, there are more opportunities that become available for people of all incomes. So in Santa Clara County, the average subsidy roughly is $940 each month per household. So that's $940 additional dollars that that household has to spend in their community, at their local businesses, to invest in their family, to pay for health insurance, get great food, get their kids into dance classes, which are expensive. So there's real value to families and communities that come out of the investment that we make in affordable housing. Affordable housing also gives us a healthier environment. Allison mentioned this earlier. It's a little hard to equate this, but it's a huge impact when we provide housing that people can afford close to the jobs where they work. They don't drive as far. So in Santa Clara County per year, the estimate is that we save the equivalent of about 53 million miles of greenhouse gases produced by cars. So it's a huge investment in not only our economies and our families, but also the long-term health of our environment. We also know that affordable housing makes people healthier, and that there are tremendous costs when people are less healthy. So we know that in Santa Clara County, it saves the county about $6 million a year because we have affordable housing that provides safer, stabler places for people to live. In older housing, we have problems. Sometimes it's lead paint. Sometimes it's mold. Sometimes there are, other code violations that are hard to fix. So even in the homes that we live in, there are challenges, right? If we're living in two or three families in a home, it makes it very, very difficult to maintain a job, to not get sick when somebody else got sick. Tragically, we saw that during the pandemic, right? That when we were living with lots of people in one space, it was very difficult for us to stay healthy. So building affordable housing has a real positive impact on the health of our population. We know also that affordable housing generates wages when we build it, but it's also because of the money that goes back in. Remember, $940 a month? It's generating economic activity in our communities. If you think about where you live and you think about the businesses struggling to stay afloat because the community doesn't have the resources to support them and get everything that they want, just think. If everybody had an extra $940 a month to invest in the community, right? It supports small businesses, it produces jobs, it creates opportunities for families to thrive and for communities to thrive. So the estimate is that the investments we've made in affordable housing are generating $241 million in taxes and produce $840 million per year in additional wages and business income in Santa Clara County. So, we as a country always act like we can't find the money to solve this home affordability crisis, which implies that we are not spending it now. And we believe that we are spending it now. We're just spending it on adverse health and bad outcomes. The benefits of affordable housing for our communities far outweigh the costs when you acknowledge that we're already paying for housing instability and homes that people can't afford to live in. So what can we do about it? A critical part of this is just telling the story. It's really important that we acknowledge the fact that it is hard to live in homes that we can't afford. And that's not a personal failing. That's a structural problem we have in our society, in our city, in the county, right? We're not producing enough housing to house the people who live here and who sustain the economy and the families and communities. We need to support investment in affordable housing that's going to make us stronger and better and healthier. And you all have to tell that story. Because it's up to us to be able to make that case. And so that's really our core goal, is to get folks in a position where they can say, you know what, this is important. This is really in our interest. We also are really asking folks to think about how they can get involved in supporting additional sources of funding for affordable housing. Remember the puzzle? And the missing piece was the local piece, or maybe the local and the county piece, and that's what allowed that whole system to work and to fill the gap to make that housing affordable. We have to collectively commit to finding local resources to invest in this housing. When we do it, we get extra money from the state, we can leverage money from the feds, but we have to make a commitment locally to do that. So Silicon Valley at Home works with cities to look at ways of doing that. There's some money that comes in. Some cities look at different ways of taxing transfer of real estate. Right now, we are working on an opportunity that will be on the ballot in November of 2024 that will be asking us as a Bay Area to make a commitment to invest in affordable housing. So there's decisions that cities need to make to raise the money, but there's also our collective interest in making sure that we're advocating where the opportunities are there to bring more resources in. That is the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Allison and Matthew. And this slide, we want to share with you about the City of Gilroy website, where we have a lot of resources, and we want to provide you the contact information as well. So if you go to www.cityofgilroy.org/housing, that's where you'll see the flyer for this event, and I think we'll be able to post the presentation there too, the PowerPoint presentation. And we have resources sort of grouped into the 3 Ps, and that's production, preservation, protection. And we conducted actually 12 workshops last year in collaboration with many of the nonprofit service providers. We have those posted on our website as well, so please feel free to go there and review those information. And if you have any questions about housing, we have an email account that's just called housing@cityofgilroy.org. So these are all pretty easy to remember. So we want to make sure, you're aware of these resources and know our contact information. And we're physically in the Community Development Department, which is located in City Hall where we are. And at the bottom, that's just our address and phone number if you want to look for us in person or give us a call.